everybody, how's it going today? Well, this week's topic, just like every other topic, it seems kind of blindsided me during the week. Um, it seems like you guys are making a lot of news lately, or at least you guys are, you know, committing yourselves and creating a lot of news and a lot of topics that are worth covering. So it's really hard sometimes to narrow it down to one for each week. Obviously, it's how much notoriety did it have inside, outside the fandom. All these things come into weight on it. And unfortunately, this week, one of the news stories is certainly the one that we're going to be discussing. And that is because of the unfortunate side effect that it had. And it has implications outside the fandom. It brings into discussion about social media, how you utilize social media, and the implications and impacts that blundering on social media can cause for people as far as careers go and things like that. It really has a lot of implications outside the fandom, and the fact that it brings in another group of nerds out there. You know, you NASA nerds, you science nerds, it brings you into the fold. So today we are going to be discussing a very controversial issue that occurred on social media revolving around a furry, a NASA internship, and a social media blunder of a galactic proportion. So let's get into the topic. So a furry by the name of Naomi got an internship at NASA. She was feeling great. She was feeling awesome. She wanted to share her feelings to the world, to the internet, to feel like she's been vindicated for all that hard work and effort that she put into, studying STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and all that other stuff. She put her nose to the grindstone, did all that work, put in for a NASA internship, and wow, yeah, baby, she got it. Unfortunately, so this is what she decided to do. She feel in that emotional rush. She went, everybody, shut the F up. I got accepted for a NASA internship. I'm Rick James, right? And then, so she's excited about it. So this random guy, Homer Hicken, says, language. So Naomi, thinking that this is just some random dude on Twitter, goes, "Es my D and my cojones, I'm working at NASA." So everyone's like, huh, well, that's interesting. Why would something like this go viral? That doesn't make any sense. Why would something about, it just seems like some random encounter in the thing. This furry is obviously very elated that they got into NASA, and they used some crass language to do it, but sure, it's nothing too, there's crass language on Twitter all the time. It's not something that censors language. It's something. Twitter is very much a social media platform that you don't want to have your kids using without supervision, for sure. There's adult language. There could be adult pictures. There's problems with that. So understanding that, and same with YouTube. YouTube is not really a platform that you want to give kids free reign. As you saw there was some language in that particular thing. I have to, obviously for someone like me who's like, well, I don't want to really make this an adult-only channel, it could be like, well, should I censor that? And my answer to that is no. If somebody is using crass language and it's part of the news story, I have to present that crass language for the general viewing public, because if I alter something, then what else could I alter? You know what I mean? To make it seem more consumable, as it were. We're adults talking about adult things, so having that sort of thing is very important. But in the olden days, in older generations, using such language, when talking about one's professional things, isn't seen as very positive. And that's a result of us dropping F-bombs and S-bombs all over the place on Twitter and YouTube. The Game Grumps have a channel that's about gaming, and a lot of kids watch it, or a lot of youth watches it. and they have a tendency to let language and adult topics fly out sometimes. So it's not really something that you'd want to have just a younger audience always consuming. That being said, and all that nuance aside, it's like, so this is just about language and something like that. Well, it goes a little deeper than that. How does something go viral? Well, you have to have a fourth panel. You have to have that fourth panel. So here is that fourth panel. His response to SMID is, yeah, I'm a consulman at NASA. Now you can see now it makes sense, right? Now you can see how this went viral. This is like that ooh moment. Oh, it's like, oh, because people don't know this guy either, right? As much as we like to say that, as much as this guy ends up being a little more famous than a lot of people give him credit for, he doesn't have a blue verified check mark on Twitter, first off, so he must be not that well known. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't have a blue check mark on Twitter, how can you be somebody who's of power of importance, right? But apparently this guy is famous, and we're going to go into that in a little bit. But he's sort of class C level celebrity famous in the NASA community. So we're going to go over that in a little bit. But right now, basically, he came up and said, "Please, yeah, I'm on the council for NASA, so So at that point, the best solution probably would have been like, oh crap, I better delete this tweet." She did eventually delete this tweet and this thread. Unfortunately, the internet caught it before that could be helped. And so obviously this tweet made by this person here who quoted this, it's like, oh, of course, this is 2018. It's like, of course we have this situation occurring because this is 2018. Furry accidentally told one of her superiors in the place that she just was about to get hired as an intern, it went bad. And so obviously that interaction went viral. Because that interaction went viral, it eventually trickled back up to other people on the NASA board, not through his direct connections, but other people at NASA eventually found out about this because obviously it's kind of a viral tweet, and like anyone can type in NASA and search for things. So eventually the rest of the board found out, and unfortunately she's not an intern there anymore. So obviously this has caused a lot of frustrations within the furry fandom, a lot of misdirected anger too, because it comes to be found out that the Homer individual was just trying to guide the intern and saying his intent was to guide the intern and saying, you're a government employee now, you can't go using language like this on Twitter. I know it's hypocritical. I know we have a president and all that stuff that uses Twitter like stupid, but we're trying to get better at this, y'all. We're trying to get better at using this social media thing. Just because our president's using it in kind of off the handle, off the cuff manners, doesn't mean our youth should be doing it too. It's something we should be moving away from. That was probably his thought. So let's go a little bit more deeper into this. Who is this Homer Hickam guy? So Homer Hickam apparently is known because his big claim to fame, or at least his big thing, is a play that he did. I think it was a play he wrote that was called October Sky. I could be wrong. I think it was some sort of playwright or something that he did named October Sky, which talked about his time as a youth and growing up because he grew up in West Virginia, and so he grew up in a very blue collar family, and trying to pursue scientific pursuits is very seen as like a pie in the sky sort of dream. And they made Hollywood made a movie, a motion-like movie about his youth, called October Sky. So you can Google October Sky and find, you can rent it on YouTube. I'll put it up in the card right there, actually. Hey, YouTube, sponsor me, man. Even though I don't get 1,000 subscribers, I'm already kind of promoting your content that you people can rent stuff. But yeah, you can rent the movie and watch it and understand like the guy's background. It's a very cool background. He also was a Vietnam vet. He was a Vietnam vet as well. Um, so it's very, as an aside, it's very weird to see a a person who was a Vietnam vet sort of taking a tactical retreat because the person Homer, after this whole thing went down, he put up a blog indicating it's like, well, this is my intent was not to get her in trouble. My intent was to try and get her to temper down a little bit and try to get get her to change the language and try to get her to realize it's like you really are in an important position. Could you do that? And unfortunately, he did it in the wrong way. They both kind of made an error here, and like it really is. It is one of those tragic things where two forces come together, and sort of two people who are somewhat using social media in a way that's detrimental come together, and it kind of creates something that it was larger than it should be. So, for instance, on the one side, you can't really blame Naomi for feeling that way, because it is really hard to get it. This is not like McDonald's or anything. This is like getting into a very good position. This is getting into a very thing. So she's excited. She's elated. She's happy. She wants to tell the world, and she's using very crass language of doing it. But it's the crass language is to hyphenate to emphasize her passion and her joy. And unfortunately, like, somebody's like, well, you got to temper that joy back a little bit. You got to be a little more, because it's a government position. You got to temper that back a bit. On Homer's end, at that point, if you want to have an employee temper back their social media language a bit, you tell her that in private, right? You don't pull this rank thing, like, because this is something that's even understood in the modern workforce, right? If you publicly give your rank to an employee who's just made a simple mistake in the public like this, it's gonna get people talking, right? It's gonna draw attention to it. If the goal was to not draw attention to this language being used, as in its ties with NASA, this was probably the worst way to go about doing it. It probably would have been better for for the superior here to sort of, take it into a private conversation and have her quietly take it down. Like, say, I saw your tweet there. Understand that as a NASA employee, like, I know you're excited to be here. We're glad to have you too, and we're excited to see what you bring to the table. But you need to calm it down a little bit, because you represent more than just yourself now. You represent NASA as well, and we want to try and make it so that we want to have the youth excited to work for NASA too, and we don't want to have parents worrying about having to look at crass language for their kids, and all that stuff. Like, we want them to be able to engage with NASA and have a dream of being a scientist one day as well. And that's a very adamant and very sincere sort of expectation. So, he did something out of the goodness of his heart. He did it in the wrong way. He ended up doing the thing that he wanted to prevent doing. And I think that's sort of why he backed off of this whole thing too, why he kind of took a tactical retreat, as it were, into this whole social media thing. Naomi too. Like, while I don't blame her for her second response, because this is just some random guy on the internet. So, it's kind of like, oh, well, this is just some random guy on the internet. I'm going to double down because someone's trying to censor me and my feelings and things like that, so I'm just going to double down and do it. My critique on that is that, yeah, that's the normal stimulus response. But when you're going into a field that requires you to taper in your emotions and use it to understand and gain more knowledge about the situation at hand to make a more effective scientific decision, when some random person comes up on the internet and says language, before you respond to them, do research on who they are. And this is just useful advice in general for social media. If somebody tweets at you, look at their profile on Twitter before you respond to them. Look at that and do that, because that will give you a ability to see sort of what they're coming from, what their background is. Because you can actually better communicate with somebody if you know what their background is. Because if you know that person's a scientist, you can talk like a scientist. If you know that person's a politician, you can talk like a politician. If you know that person's right wing or left wing, you can, address them from that angle. So it really is something that needs to be thought of. You need to be able to step back, put your emotions aside for a moment, and then sort of assess the situation around you, and then come up with a proper decision. In this case, they followed their impulses, and that following their impulses led to a bit of a wreck. And so, that can happen if you allow your emotions to get the best of you at the workplace too, especially in a very scientific thing, especially something as intense as, astrophysics and stuff like that, where you have a lot of expensive equipment out there in the stars, and you have to make decisions based on trajectories and math and stuff like that, and make sure that you make effective decisions at the right time. So, at the end of the day, so in his blog post, he said that, he is going to try and help this individual find, a job in the astro things. Because they made a mistake. And they both made a mistake. And by the way, Homer is not like some experienced guy on the console either. Apparently, according to, oh my god, I'm doing horrible. Apparently, according to space.com, he's actually he's a first-year person on the console. So probably what he was doing was like searching through basically Twitter history and things like that, and trying to find he's probably looking for NASA stuff so he could talk to people on Twitter if they had any questions about space or anything like that. And he ended up finding that tweet from their intern, and he tried to get that person to change their tone on their tweet, and ended up failing because they went about it the wrong way. And I think that's why he's also taking a break from Twitter, and they're both taking a break from Twitter because obviously they both sort of have to reassess their usage of social media, and that's fine. But we make mistakes because one person might think it's Naomi should have known who Hickam was, right? Hickam's kind of a big deal and thing. He's got a movie made off of him about science and things like that. If she watched October Sky or something like that, should know who Hickam is. But here's the thing, October Sky came out in 1999, and even people who are into this stuff for a living make mistakes about Hickam. They might not know who Hickam is fully either, because I'm about to show you an interesting thing. Look at this thing. So here's space.com. This is a quote from space.com. It talks about Hickam here. And if you read the stuff in the thing below, I underlined something in red. Basically, that item in red here is the issue, and it says where he grew up in the 1930s, the 1930s Depression, and he grew up in a small town in West Virginia, which is true. He grew up to the 1930s Depression. And if you go down a little further, what you see is he says this is his first year on the console, which is an interesting fact that I didn't really know. But there's a problem here. Why would somebody on the console, why would NASA hire somebody who's basically 100 years old onto the console? Because if you do the math, the Great Depression was in the 1930s. If October Sky took place in the 1930s, that means Homer Hickam was in his teens in 1930. If he's in his teens in 1930, that means he's approaching his 90th year on this planet, right? It's just basic math, right? Even if you're not good at history, that's math. So there's something wrong with that, and yes, there is something wrong with that. Exhibit B. A simple Google search of this guy's name, and you can find out that he was born in 1943. So, space.com. How can a man born in 1943 grow up during the Great Depression? because I think 1943 is the year that like World War II was kind of updating. So he was not. Hickam was not part of the Greatest Generation. He was part of the baby boomer generation. Okay, I know this guy's a big deal and all that stuff, but you got to get the era in which he was born correct, right? You got to do that because like people make mistakes is what I'm trying to say, right? If you think that everybody who's into this whole STEM stuff and science stuff knows every other scientist out there, apparently that's not the case because of, this person who wrote this space.com article didn't even know who Hickam was in the fully thing. And I know what you're also thinking, Mr. Hickam over here, like they look like they look sort of like Will. If anyone was going to play them as an adult in the movie industry, it would be Will Ferrell because he looks a lot like Will Ferrell, and it's kind of funny. And he's more like Will Ferrell these days than he probably would want to let on, because oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly that. Because he's also saying it's like, well, that escalated quickly. I think that's something that he probably said during this particular time too, because holy cow, did this particular thing escalate pretty quickly. But anyways, at the end of the day, Homer Hickam has indicated that he's going to try and help this individual get into the space industry, and so that's great, or not in the space industry, but like aerodynamics. Try and maybe help her get a job in the private sector, use her as a reference, things like that, and try to help her get onto this thing because he didn't want to lose her as an employee. He just wanted to try to rein in the emotion a little bit. It turned out not turning out so well, and so it was sort of this unfortunate side effect of things happening on both sides. And to me, it's like. There's a lot of sort of sweeping under the rug here, a lot of blame and things like that. But I think as scientists, I think the difference between a scientist and a politician, the main difference in my mind is this. A scientist looks at all the errors that occur around them and asks why. Assesses the situation, how things could become better, and things like that. So for superiors, it's if you have to say something to an employee, don't pull rank on them in the midst of social conversation on the internet. Because it really is a different world on the internet. We really are peers of one another on the internet, as opposed to in our real life world where it's more based on a hierarchy. We don't see each other as peers as default. We know who has more experience than the other person based on who they are and what their title is. And on the internet, we really don't have that. This person was just a stranger, and until they let the world know that they were part of the hierarchy and that they were above her in the hierarchy, and that reveal is what made this viral. If that reveal didn't happen, then people wouldn't have been going, yip, 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 look at this person being disrespectful to their older person. How dare they? How dare they do that? How dare they do that? If I did that to my employee, first off, it's not the same. Because here's the thing. Naomi's thing is anonymous, right? Her profile is not tied to her human name. Yet there are so few NASA interns that NASA was able to go, oh yeah, you know who that is? It's the person we just hired, like just now. If you did that at McDonald's and some random McDonald's superior CEO comes to talk to a McDonald's employee on social media, if a let's say for some weird reason, some McDonald's employee's like, I just got hired at McDonald's. F you all. Yeah, look at this. I'm so excited. I don't know why you would be, but it doesn't make any sense, but sure. But if a higher employee went and said, well, you got to calm your tone because you're tying it in with McDonald's and we don't want that, it's going to be harder to find out who that person is, right? Because there's so many being hired at the same time. It's a large corporation. There's people coming in, going out. Like, it's easier to be anonymous as an employee of other places than NASA, because it's such a specific field that there's have so few hires that even anonymity doesn't help you. And, maybe that anonymity didn't help here with the individual, but it's interesting to think about things like that. There's a lot of conspiracies about, individuals who didn't like Naomi, who were like enemies of hers, or had political differences since they're a transgender individual. Like, we're using social media in order to try and get her fired because of just of who she is and not because of her merits and anything like that. Whether that is true or not, as a scientist, you have to look at the saying, like, what caused it to become viral? And I don't think it became viral because of that. I think it became viral because of the combination of the pulling rank by the superior at the office space. Instead of taking it to a private conversation, they made it into the public sphere that she was letting off curse words at a person who was a superior to her in the network. And a combination of the individual who's an intern not assessing the situation fully about who she was responding to or what this random person was talking about before she allowed herself to make the response. So it is a misuse of social media on both parts. But we should all learn from mistakes. That's the difference between a scientist and a politician, is saying, what were the mistakes? Look at it look at it from a third person perspective. What were the mistakes? What can be learned here? What can be gleaned here? How do we come up with rule sets and understanding how to utilize social media more effectively and more usefully? As you can tell, it's getting dark out. If you're not going crazy, I'm recording this pretty late, and that's sort of also why I'm a little ill-prepared. I took a nap, and I took it a little too long. So, unfortunately, the natural light that's outside is going down. We're talking about space, guys. It has to get dark in here if we're going to talk about space. So, it's a feature. It's not a bug. So, that happened, right? And so, what do we do from here? Well, Naomi, luckily, seems like... Luckily and fortunately, even though this big blunder, it looks like she has the ability to go on and move to other bigger things, because she's got, it takes a lot of work and hard work and dedication to get to that, to get to STEM and getting that thing. And you know what? When things calm down in a few years, because this is the thing about social media, it has a lot of fire, but it tapers out. Like, it really is a fiery passion, and the thing that people are passionate about one week fizzles out and peters off to something that, is something else completely different in the next week. And a big hint, as long as you allow it to peter out, right? This is going to bring discussion around this topic a little bit longer, sure. But I hope it's a useful discussion as opposed to an angry discussion about these kind of situations, right? So to me, a year from now, 2 years from now, the whole thing, already the person who was the victim of the language has been, has cleaned his hands and forgiven. The general Joe public, obviously, is less forgiving, okay? We all know this. But, eventually their anger will taper back too. They'll get angry at something else and go look at the other shiny thing to get distracted and angry at. And so when that time comes, my suggestion would be to put in for an internship at that time, and then remember that this time when you get if you get accepted, to not get so I'm Rick James on social media, right? To not get so excited, not get too excited, to temper it back a little bit, be a little bit more under the hat about it, and maybe not even bring it up at all. Maybe let's tell your close friends in private, tell people in private, just so people don't go, news hounds and news ruse like me don't go, hey, that person who got let go from being an intern at NASA. Oh well, she's back in there again. Yeah, just don't even give us the time of day, okay? Just, I know that's at my own detriment, but just go in there quietly and enjoy yourself. And enjoy your career as a NASA person in the future, right? You could try for it. Obviously, you want to try and utilize the thing and follow Homer's suggestion of taking internships and things at other places, and And I think that everything will come out fine. It's just a lot of fire and heat right now. But I think in the end it'll get better. And but to me, I think the last and important thing to state is that the difference between, once again, to emphasize the difference between scientists and politicians. Politicians like to sweep this kind of stuff under the rug and try to pretend that it never happened and stuff like that because people are not very forgiving. So they think that the best way to resolve unforgiving individuals is to sweep things under the rug and try to pretend that they're not flawed human beings and that they're gods among men and try and trick people into believing that they are gods among men. Pay no attention to that person behind the curtain. But at the end of the day, that's what makes scientists more respected, I think, than politicians, is that they are willing to, look at the mistakes that they made, own up to those mistakes, and not only own up to those mistakes, but utilize those mistakes to get information about the mistakes to people so that because there's something to be learned from mistakes as well. And I think that's a very important thing to understand in our discourse as we go along. But it's getting really dark out. I'm fading out into the night, into the darkness, and so I'm gonna get the hop out of here before you can't see me at all, except for the lights on my glasses here above my computer. Woo! So I'm gonna get the hop out of here. What do you think about the whole situation? What are ways that you use social media? What do you think about employers and employees? That was another debate. Gosh dang it. That was another huge thing that kind of was an aftermath of this whole thing. There was a huge debate about, employers seeing, being able to see what people do on social media in their spare time and if they're allowed, if they are allowed to, or if they should even be allowed to view what people do on social media and have it impact their work. Interesting, it kind of flipped the script, because usually this would be like something that the alt-right, or not the alt-right, but conservatives would bring up. It's like people shouldn't be able to utilize what people do in their free time to weigh in on their work. And now it's the people on the left going that way. It's like people at employers shouldn't be able to utilize what people do on their free time on their social media against them at the office, right? That's something that shouldn't happen, and they feel that it's an encroachment. Other people are like, well, when you get to a certain position that is of higher importance, then you do have to allow it to bleed into your personal life. Because if you think about it, like if somebody's the president and the president's like, well, I'm on the clock from 9 to 5, and as soon as I walk out the door, I could say whatever I want, and I could do whatever I want. Unfortunately, we don't hold people in higher power offices to that standard. The moment we do, unfortunately, it's sort of bleeding where people in lower power positions are starting to feel that weight of having to be at work 24/7 as well. And so there's that whole give and take on that, and there's a whole debate about that. So I guess if you're going to leave anything in the comment section, it would be what's your feelings about employer-employee relationships on the internet? How should they be handled? What do you think about that? Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section if you like what you see. Thank you very much. And this show is on every Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll talk about another interesting furry topic. Hopefully not as detrimental to an individual as this one was, and because it is unfortunate that they lost that position. This is a hard position to get, and my empathy goes out to Naomi on this, because it is not an easy thing to acquire and then have to lose. But I think that as long as she puts her nose to the grindstone, I think she can make a comeback, and I hope she does. And I'm glad that Homer is trying to help her out with that, and that we could learn and glean from something from this. So, thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody. See you again next week.